guys, it's Elisa and welcome to this advanced vocabulary video. So today I'm going to go over 5 different words. So these words show you the tone of what someone's saying. And our tone is how we feel, what our attitude is. It's kind of the way that we say something, not necessarily the exact words that we say. I talk about this a little bit if you have seen any of my imitation videos. And if you're interested in understanding how people say something, I definitely recommend that you check those out. But first, let's get to these 5 words. So our first word is insincere. So insincere means you're not being honest. You're not being truthful with what it is that you are saying or doing. So maybe you are saying to someone, "You're so wonderful. I like you so much. You're great." But that's not really how you feel. You actually feel the opposite. In that case, you are being insincere. You can also be insincere with your actions. So maybe you're doing something really nice for somebody. Maybe you're doing something really nice for your neighbor. You're helping them with things. You're making sure that you say hi. But in reality, you're actually saying mean things about them behind their back. Maybe you're only doing nice things for them because you want to get something out of it. Maybe you want them to do something for you. Maybe you are being really sinister and you want to take or steal something from them. Whatever it is, the reason that you're being nice to them is not good. It's not real. It's not genuine. You are probably up to no good. Now, you could also be insincere in your actions or in your words because you want to make yourself look good. You look better if you're being nice to someone. Think about a politician. A lot of times politicians will do and say things, but they don't really mean it. They're not doing it because they want to help you or because they want to be nice. They are doing it because they want to get something for themselves. And usually when we're being insincere, either in our words or in our actions, it's because we think we're going to benefit from it. Maybe we benefit from it because you stop complaining. Maybe we benefit from it because you're going to vote for us. You're going to say something nice about us. We're going to look good in front of our friends or in front of some other group of people we want to impress. Whatever it is, we're not being truthful. We're not being honest. We're not being genuine. We're lying. So some synonyms for insincere are artificial, false, fake, hollow, pretend, put on. You can even say someone is being exaggerated or overdone. And that would just mean you're just over the top with your feelings. We know this isn't real. It's insincere. So the best antonym for insincere is sincere, because when you are sincere, you are genuine. You mean what you're saying. When you're doing something, you're doing it because you want to. There's no ulterior motive. So when you use insincere in a sentence, you might say something as simple as, "Listen, I know you're being insincere. I know this isn't what you really think. You don't have to be nice to me just to make yourself look good. I can't believe he was being so insincere. I didn't see that coming." So our next word is artificial. And isn't that perfect because it is a synonym for insincere. So artificial has 2 main meanings, and the first one is insincere. It just means that you are being fake, you're not being truthful, you are usually doing something for reasons other than what they seem. And usually when we talk about someone being artificial, we are talking about their actions. They're doing something that just seems a little fake and phony. So some synonyms for this version of artificial are unnatural, affected, forced, strained, and we can also still use false, pretend, and insincere, of course. So some antonyms are genuine and sincere. So one of the most common ways that someone can act in an artificial way is if you kind of do like an artificial smile, like not a real smile. You're not actually happy. I'm not really smiling at you. It's like it's forced. It's a forced smile. That's why forced is a synonym for artificial, because you just don't really feel that feeling behind it. You're just doing it because you have to. Like my mom told me I have to smile at you. My mom said I have to give you a hug, so I'm gonna do it. Like, meh. So it's a little bit artificial. It's not gonna be, this yay, I'm so happy to see you hug. It's gonna be a okay, I'm hugging you. Is it over? Is this hug over? It's gonna be like that. Teenagers have a lot of artificial actions because they're teenagers and they don't want to cooperate. So the other way we can use artificial is when we are talking about things that are man-made. So they're not natural. Now this could also include a copy of something. So if you make a copy of something, then it could be seen as artificial. It could be seen as not real. So maybe you have something that's really expensive, you make a copy of it, and it's not genuine. It's an artificial version of it. Think purses, think shoes. Definitely handbags. We see that all the time in major cities where you just have these fake artificial handbags. They're a copy of the real thing, but they're not real. They're artificial. We also do this with food. We have artificial ingredients, artificial flavors. These are often things that are made in some sort of food science lab where people just, make stuff up. This doesn't actually come from the earth or the ground. It's not natural food that someone would grow on a tree. It's artificial. So some synonyms for this version of artificial are synthetic, imitation, mock, faux, simulated. Like faux fur, it's artificial fur. It's not real, which is a good thing. So being artificial isn't always necessarily a bad thing, but usually it is looked at as being less than. So we can also still use fake and false as synonyms for this definition of the word too. And the best antonym for artificial is natural. So in a sentence, you might say something like, I try to stay away from food with artificial ingredients. I don't want to buy anything that's artificial. All right, so our next word is novel. So novel has two meanings. The one that is used the most is when we're talking about a book, we're talking about a work of fiction like the Harry Potter novels, the Hunger Game novels. Those are all novels because they are works of fiction. If we're talking about something that is true, not based off of something true, but something that is actually true, like a biography or an autobiography, that is not a novel. So for this version of novel, you don't really have exact synonyms. You just have other words that you would use. And so those would be words like book, paperback, hardback, story, narrative. Then you could get into the specific genre. So like romance, dystopian, or mystery. So any way that you would categorize books of fiction is a synonym for this word. There really aren't antonyms that you would use. An autobiography or a biography would kind of be the opposite. They're not really exact opposites. They're just different kinds of books. But anyway, in a sentence, you might say something like, I can't wait to read that new novel. I'm writing a novel. So the other way that this word can be used, which is used a little bit less often, but that also kind of depends on the circles that you travel in. But you could use novel to refer to something new or something that has never been done or suggested before. So if a new technology came out, that could be called novel. We definitely talk about novel ideas. That is something that you will hear a lot. I tend to hear the word novel used in this way when talking about the law. There was this show, I can't remember the name of it, that I like to watch, and there was a lawyer, and the lawyer had to come up with a novel idea, a new idea, because the judge said so. Otherwise, the case was going to get dismissed, or they weren't going to get more time, or something like that. but they have to come up with a novel argument, a new argument, an argument that they had not made before. So really the best synonym for novel is new. Everything else is like a little bit off in my opinion. And the best antonym would be old, already done, been there, done that, existing, familiar, words like that. So in a sentence, you might say something like, we have 2 days to come up with a novel argument for the judge. Or you might say something like, if we don't come up with a novel idea, we might lose our funding. So our next word is rigid. And rigid just refers to something not changing, not bending. A lot of times we talk about people being rigid. You can also talk about objects being rigid. Let's start with people. So if someone is super stubborn, they just do not like to change their mind. They do not like to deviate from what they are doing. You might consider them rigid. You might have a friend that's rigid. So just because someone is rigid doesn't mean they're a bad person. It doesn't mean you don't like them. Usually when someone is rigid, you're saying they're stuck in their ways, they're stubborn, they don't like to change. We all know someone like this. We all are like this. We all have things that we are rigid about. We all have things where we're just like, this is how I'm doing it. I'm not changing. I don't care what you say. I don't care what the consequences are. This is how it's going to be. And that is rigid. Some people are more rigid than others, but we're all a little bit rigid in a way. Some people are really rigid with their ideas. Maybe they just think the way people thought 50 years ago and they just haven't changed with the times and they refuse to. In that case, rigid is probably a bad thing. Some people might be rigid in the way they raise their children. That could be good or bad depending on what you're doing. But maybe you're just like, these are the rules. They're very strict. The rules are not going to change. And in that case, you would be rigid. And your teenagers, if you had teenagers, would probably slam the door in your face and yell, I hate you. But in that case, being rigid maybe isn't such a bad thing. So in this case, we might use synonyms like fix, set, firm, inflexible, immutable, unchanging, stubborn, and truly the best antonym for this one is flexible. So you might say something like, my husband or wife is the most rigid person on earth. He just refuses to change his mind. I just read a story earlier today about Victoria Beckham, who apparently, according to her husband, has been eating the same meal, steamed vegetables and fish for 25 years. That is rigid. That is some seriously rigid thinking around food and way of eating. So when we're not talking about people, we can also say that an object is rigid, and that just means it cannot be bent. It's pretty much the same definition as people. I just know we all know rigid people. That's why I started with that one. But I mean, even if you just take a phone, or I mean, this glass is rigid. You are not bending this glass. I mean, you could break it, but it'd still be straight. So, you have certain things where you can just bend really easily. And so they're very flexible. And then you have like steel or stone and it doesn't bend. It might break, but it's not going to bend. And so that means it is rigid. So some synonyms for this definition of the word are stiff, hard, firm, inflexible, unbending, and unyielding. So in a sentence, you might say something like, this pole is so rigid. I don't know how I'm supposed to get it in here. It won't bend at all. I need something that's more rigid. I'm afraid this isn't going to hold up under the storm. But I have to say, I think I usually hear people talk about rigid when they are talking about people's behavior. So kind of along the same lines, our next word is stability. Stability literally means being stable. So you can be stable physically, you can be stable emotionally, you cannot be stable physically or not be stable emotionally. We can use this when we're talking about people or when we are talking about objects. So you could talk about someone's mental stability or their mental instability. You can talk about, like, some people are just like stable people physically, like usually they're big and strong and like they're just hard to physically move. You can talk about someone being financially stable. So just everything's even. It's just not a lot of ups, not a lot of downs. We are just right here. We are good right here. And being stable is usually always a positive thing. I can't really think of it truly being negative, although there's always a way. But usually it is viewed as something that is good. That doesn't necessarily mean that if you're not stable, it has to be like the worst thing in the world. But, as people, most of us prefer for ourselves, the people we're around, and our things to be stable. So some synonyms for stable are firmness, steadiness, solidity, strength, fastness, balance, security, and safety. The best antonym is unstable or instability. There's also unsteadiness. This is a phrase but lacks consistency would be a good one too. So when we're talking about stability, you might say something in a sentence like, it's really important to me that I always have financial stability. You could also say something like, I feel like there's been a lack of stability in our relationship lately, or there's been a lack of stability in my life lately. So anytime something is going up and down, it's not stable. And anytime something is steady, it is stable. All right, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this one. If you like this, you'll probably also like my imitation mimicking videos. It's all about helping you guys improve your speaking skills and your conversation skills. In them, I go over a monologue that mimics the way that I would talk to a friend, and you guys can learn how to do it too. I will make sure that I put a link to some of those in the description below. If you liked this video, definitely let me know, because if you guys like it, I will do some of these advanced words every week. See you in the next one.